Fabulous book from Rajani, Mirror to Mirror. I got to take a peek at this, got to read it beforehand, so I will not do any spoilers, I promise, but it is beautiful, as of course we all know that it would be. So congratulations, happy book birthday, and thank you so much for being here, Rajani.
Thank you, Casey. I'm so excited to be here. As you know, I was plaguing this place since before I had a book. I was like, hi, Paul. Hi. By the way, I don't have a book yet, but I might have a book someday. And so I've always been a huge fan of this bookstore. It's so awesome. And I'm just delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
We're happy to have you. So happy to have you. By the way, there are gorgeous cookies over there if anybody hasn't seen them. Book launch cookies. And an array of other Rajani LaRocca books. So I encourage you to take a look. But we're here to talk about Mirror to Mirror, so I'm very excited to talk about this book. Let's see where to start. I have so many questions.
Yes.
Could you tell us a tiny bit, in your own words, what the book is about, so that I don't inadvertently give spoilers, and then we'll go from there.
Yes. So Mirror to Mirror is a contemporary novel. It is set in the present day, which is different from the last book, Red, White, and Whole, which was historical fiction, I'm sad to say. That was set in 1983. Ouch. Okay, ouch. So contemporary novel, also told in verse, so written in poetry, and it's dual point of view, with twin sisters, identical twins, Maya and Chaya. And they love music almost as much as they love each other. But Maya, has a secret. She's got a horrible problem with anxiety, and she's kind of hiding it from the whole world, except for her twin, because her twin kind of knows everything about her. And she doesn't want to tell anybody about it, including her parents, because she's just worked herself up into this state where she feels like if she tells somebody, that means that everything is going to fall apart. Like, she's afraid to put more stress in her parents' life, and they're already kind of having stress. So, but Chaya sees that she needs help, and she needs more help than she can give her as a kid. So she tries to tell her parents, and when she tries to do that, Maya stops her and then shuts her out completely because she's so mad. And in reaction to that, Chaya is like, I don't really understand why she's so anxious, but maybe it has something to do with me, because we look alike, we play the same kind of classical music, so maybe it's my pressure, like maybe I'm putting pressure on her without trying to. So she changes everything about herself. She changes the kind of music she plays, she puts a pink streak in her hair, which is really not, her mom is really not a fan of that. So she tries to do that, but instead of bringing them closer together, it pushes them further apart. And then the last part of the book is them going to their music summer camp, and kind of like The Parent Trap, they make a bet to switch places. They are going to pretend to be each other and play each other's music, which is not easy to do. And whoever lasts the longest without being discovered gets to decide where they go to high school, which is something they've been arguing about. So during the course of that, they learn a lot about each other, like what it literally feels like to be in the other person's shoes, and also a lot about themselves. So that's the book in a nutshell.
So, I mean, I have to ask the question, where did the seed for this story come from?
So when I talk about writing verse novels, when I teach a workshop on it, I really do think the longer I write books, the more I believe in this kind of woo-woo, weird kind of way that stories come to us. And the woo-woo way that verse novels come to me is typically I write a poem pretty early on, and then in retrospect I'm like, oh, well, this is the entire book. And so that happened with Red, White, and Whole, and it happened with this book. So in April of 2020, like right at the beginning of the pandemic, I took an online workshop with Leslie Newman, the amazing renowned poet, and she was teaching a course, like a little workshop on certain types of formal poetry. And so, you know, sometimes when, for example, in school, if your teacher says, write an essay about anything, and your mind just goes blank, and you're like, I don't know. Like, if you could write about anything, then how do you decide, right? But then sometimes if your teacher says, write an essay about the best vacation you ever had, then you're like, aha, now I can figure out what to say, because I'm gonna think about all the vacations I ever went on, and awesome. So she was talking about formal poetry types. And so sometimes when you have a form that you've got to fit your poem into, it's easier to write because you're like, okay, I know this is the way the poem has to go. And so the type of poem that she talked about was called a ghazal, which is a type of poem that is popular in South Asia and the Middle East, and it is often set to music. So it's often a song. And so the form has a refrain at the end of each line. And so I was so inspired by that. And she showed us a bunch of examples. Like she showed us a traditional one. She showed us people's take on it. Like somebody wrote a ghazal about a cat. And I was like, that's awesome. And that's like so cool. They're often about, they're often about love, and they're often kind of yearning and sad. So I wrote a poem in that form, and I will read it for you because it ended up in the book. So this is from Maya's point of view, and it's called In the Morning. We open our eyes just the same in the morning. These weeks feel like such a strange game in the morning. My sister, she sings like a lark in the morning. The look that she gives me, so dark in the morning. She tosses her bed sheets aside in the morning. She puts on her armor to hide in the morning. I miss her identical smile in the morning, but I'm stuck on my separate aisle in the morning. I feel so apart from my twin in the morning. Can't think of how to begin in the morning. We used to be fully in sync day and night, and now she believes that I'm wrong and she's right. We open our eyes just the same. It's like morning. Oh.
So good. M-O-U-R-I-N-G.
Yes.
Yes.
So I wrote that poem, and it really didn't change that much. And it was about twin sisters, and one of them is lamenting that the other one has changed and they've grown apart. And then I was like, what's that all about? So I was like, okay. And so then I started thinking about twin sisters and it's a song, right? A ghazal is a song. So I knew that music had to do with this story. So that's where it started.
Okay, so you have the inkling of twins, twin sisters, and I think one of the things you do really well, Rajani, is you create sort of layers to your books, layers of authenticity, layers of a real family, of a real dynamics, real people that you can hold on to in a fictional book. And one of those layers is a very sophisticated and complex and nuanced relationship between two twin sisters. And I'm wondering about how you developed the voices for those girls. How did you, this voice comes through loud and clear, and I'm sure that was almost rattling for, to figure out what her story is, but how did you work on and develop them distinctly? Because they are distinct, and they do feel connected, but individual. So how did you do that? Tell us. How did you do that? How do you do that?
So first of all, I should just confess to all of you, I'm an only child. I have no siblings. I don't know what it's like to have a sibling. I have cousins, which is really not the same thing, because cousins are a lot more all the fun side and none of the downside of siblings. And so I did some research. I interviewed a bunch of identical twins. So my mother-in-law is an identical twin, and I remember she and her twin sister told me so many stories over the years of how spookily connected they sometimes were, and they'd buy each other the same gift. They'd get each other the same shirt in two different colors. It was a really kind of whoa. But then I interviewed some younger sets of twins too, and they told me some stories, and I was like, okay, this is really a relationship that nobody else has. One of them said to me, oh, that feeling, that moms have, when you have a child and you were like, here's the person that I would do anything for. I would die for you. As soon as that baby is born, you're like, I know this. And this twin sister said, well, I've always known what that feels like. And I was like, oh, I was like, okay. And then another one said, oh yeah, when I was in college and looking around to date someone, I thought, I'm not looking for my soulmate because I already have my soulmate. And I was like, whoa. So, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. But I also thought about how you can be that close to somebody and still not fully understand what's going on in their head, because of course not. They're separate people, right? They're not you. So when I first started writing this book, my idea was to write one sister in poetry, in verse, that's Maya, and the other one in prose. So my first draft was like that.
Really?
Yes. And it was hard because I wanted to alternate the voices, but it was really hard to go from poetry mode to prose mode and back and forth. So I would end up writing chunks of the book in one voice and chunks of the book in the other, and then trying to intersperse them. And then when my editor got back to me, she said, she goes, it feels a little jarring to go back and forth. And I was like, yeah, I understand, because it felt jarring to write it. So her suggestion was to put them both in poetry. And I was like, okay. And then I thought to myself, well, how do I make them different from each other? I guess the techniques I used. So if there are there are not a lot of formal poetic forms in this, but if there are, they're Maya's voice. She's much more the
that makes sense.
poetic
personality.
rule following person. And Chaya's poetry can read a lot more like prose, even though it's still poetry. And she tends to use more colloquial words, and she tends to kind of use humor a lot more than I don't actually think Maya uses humor at all. she's got a more kind of serious.
She's restrained.
Yes.
Self-restrained in a lot of ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Chaya is much more that.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I have to tell you is that with every book that I write, I dig deep into names, because I think names are so important. Okay, so growing up Indian American, a lot of Indian families like alliteration. So I knew people, and they had 3 children, and their names were Pratima, Pradeep, and Pretam. And I was like, blah, 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 blah. And they all like looked like each other, even though they were years apart. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is hard. But yeah, or there are a lot of sisters named Preeti and Priya. Those are 2 names that often go together. So I was like, okay, like this is like, so I was like, if you had twins, like you'd probably do something like either alliterative or rhyming or something fun, and a lot of families I knew that had twins did that. And so I was like, okay, so what interesting twin names can I come up with? And then I thought of, I have a cousin named Maya. I've always loved that name. And then I have relatives named Chaya too. And I was like, Maya and Chaya, that sounds good. That sounds like a good thing. And then I went and like refreshed myself on the meanings of those names
After you picked the names.
Oh yeah, well no, I mean they were like, this was the number 1 contender. I forget what the second, because now that's who these sisters are, but I forget what the second contender was, but I looked them all up, and then I was like, no, this is clearly what I need to do. So Maya means dream or illusion, right? And it's literally like the power that that Vishnu has to like make you believe something that may or may not be true. And so Maya's whole thing, there's a part in the book where they each have to write poems about their names. And Maya is like, I'm trying to be the dream, but what if I'm just the illusion? What if I'm just like pretending to do all these things and I'm not really that good at anything, kind of thing. And I was like, that's good. And then Chaya. Oh man, should I read it? Should I read the poem? Okay.
Please.
All right. So let's see if I can find it. No, that's not it. Hold on.
78.
78? Okay, I will look.
In my version.
Sorry. Oh, here it is. Okay. So this is Chaya, the other sister, the slightly wilder sister. And just so you know, on the pages of the book, the poems for Chaya have a little streak in them, for her pink streak, and the poems for Maya do not. Chaya. What's in a name? In English, we're asked to write poems about our names, what they mean to our families, to us. My parents always told me Chaya means living, luster, beauty. But when I search, I come across a different meaning, one from a Hindu myth. The goddess Sanjna was the wife of the sun god Surya. After giving him 3 children, she could no longer bear Surya's brightness. She abandoned her husband and children and left her shadow, Chaya, whom she fashioned to look exactly like herself, to be the sun god's wife in her place. And Chaya, the ever dutiful shadow, took Sanjana's place and pretended to be Lord Surya's wife. I take a breath, read again. My name means dark reflection, shadow. And I guess I am Maya's shadow, following wherever she goes. She's the bright one. I'm right beside her when she's in the spotlight. I turn in a piece about my name meaning luster, but I also write a poem just for me, one that no one else will read. I was born after. I'm the bonus, the extra, my name chosen for rhythm, for rhyme, whatever was needed to round out the stanza, complete the song. I'm the shadow of the one who shines. I love Maya more than anyone. Just like Chaya from the myth, I'll do anything to make her happy.
I think one of the pieces of this evocative book that I love the most is this very subtle way that you capture the sisters' individualism as well as their incredibly deep love for each other. And so that feeling of when you're 12 or 13 and you want to become more of who you are, it's there. But then often when you're individuating, you're doing so almost in a self-driven sort of way, right? But in this case, with these sisters, they are taking action based on their deep love for each other. So there's this really vibrant thread of caring that connects them the whole time, even when things go south and get twisted up. So I wondered about, like, there's a lot of emotional health context in this book for lots of reasons. That's part of it. Another part of it is the way that you deal with mental health and with anxiety, which is a big part of what Maya struggles with. Did you know that was going to be integral to the storyline, or did that develop as you were sort of moving through your character development and your drafts?
I think it was pretty early on that I knew that Maya had a problem with anxiety. And I think that, what's interesting about this relationship between the two sisters is that almost nothing, like, they don't have secrets from each other, like, almost. And they know each other so well. So of course Chaya knows that, like, Maya's having a problem. So Chaya knows that Maya's got a burden to bear. And so but Chaya doesn't realize that she also has a burden. And her burden is that she feels like she always has to be there to help her sister.
Right.
And she's the one who's like, when there are many times when Maya starts to freak out, and like Chaya's like, sometimes I can stave off the storm. She thinks of it like a storm. And so she's like, I can distract her. I can, do something else. And it's taking a toll on her too. So I think that that's one of the things that they can't see because they're so close to each other. And their feeling is, as long as I have you, I don't need anybody else, kind of thing. And that's not true. The other thing that, I try to address is, different families work differently. So I grew up in a family which was full of love, but there were a lot of things we didn't talk about. Like, we didn't talk a lot about the negative stuff in life. Like, we didn't talk about things when we were anxious or afraid or worried. We just didn't say that. And so we just kind of like went along and like we tried to help each other, but it was not something that we said out loud. And so if you have a real problem and you never say it out loud, you think that there's something wrong with you. Like, you think that, like, you already think there's something wrong with you, but it's even more of a feeling that it's a secret, and it's a bad secret. And so, a lot of families I knew were like that. It was rare when I was growing up for Indian American families to be like, oh yeah, my kid has depression or anxiety or what. Like, nobody was saying that, you know what I mean? So then you thought, I'm the only one in this entire community who feels this way. And then the other thing about this book is that there are two parents who love each other but are very different from one another in how they kind of approach the world. And the mom has her own anxiety and depression issues that her mom had. And in India during that time, no one was talking about that. Like, it was a scary thing if you had significant mental illness in your family. People didn't want to talk about it, and they didn't want to kind of be around you. Like, what if it's like contagious? And so the mom in this story feels all that shame from her own mother's experience, and she doesn't want to talk about her own struggles. And so it's a problem. And so quite inadvertently, because she loves her children, she makes them feel like, we don't talk about this stuff. It's a problem if you feel like this. You need to be perfect.
So interesting, because obviously the title, Mirror to Mirror, there are so many ways that you can look at the threads of the story, mirror to mirror. So the parent dynamic and the mirroring that's happening with the kids and the girls with each other, and even to some extent their friends, their friendships, and their teachers and their relationships. I mean, it's all this sort of beautifully woven interconnectedness that exacerbates how isolated Maya and Chaya feel in their own little world, right? But then it's part of what makes it feel so lovely and so hopeful at the end, is that they are all connected in a way that's stronger because, individually, because they're all connected in that way, if that makes sense. I'm probably just babbling because none of you have read this, but but that's how it felt.
Thank you.
I want to ask you also about music, because I know when you wrote Red, White, and Whole, there was a soundtrack that you put on every night, and obviously music played a huge role in those poems and in that story. And this is classical music, so I need to know, first of all, did you play a classical instrument? And if so, I would like to know what that is.
Yeah, I played classical piano.
Did you?
Yeah, I started piano when I was 8 or 9, I think, and played seriously all the way until the end of high school. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a lot of stuff about that, and I loved it. I mean, I begged my parents to let me have piano lessons. Like, I had like only 3 teachers, I think, through all my years. Like, the first one was an older person who I think retired from piano teaching, and then I went to this other woman who was like the serious piano teacher in town. Like, her students won concerto competitions and played with the Louisville Orchestra and all this stuff, and I was like, whoa. So I played with her for a while. I had my first recital with her, and there's an echo of this for those of you who have read Midsummer's Mayhem, where the flashback where Mimi's like playing the clarinet and she plays the first note and she's like, I've never heard this note before, what am I doing? And then has like a complete recital fail. That's totally from my life, my first piano recital, where the teacher, had all these high-powered students and didn't really give me enough, didn't tell me what to really expect. I mean, we were like in a university hall. I was like in a grand piano, like, I thought all these people in the darkness, and I was like, oh. And so I played that first note, and I was like, I've never played the piano before. What am I doing? It was crazy. And so I totally bonked. I was like, and it was really bad. But then I got better, like after some periods of freaking out and not sleeping enough. I got better. And then at the end, I ended up changing to another piano teacher who was like nearer to my school. She was wonderful. I had like a solo piano concert like at my senior year. It was like beautiful. And then both of my children played classical piano, and they had a wonderful teacher, like, who loves music, who speaks with a Russian accent. So she's in this book too, and she was just wonderful. And she had such a love for music and instilled such love in her students, and was like not scary at all, and like just really wonderful. Even though performing in front of other people can be scary. So I took all of that stuff and put it in here. But neither of these girls is scared of performing. But a lot of the music that they play is music that I played and my kids played. Debussy's Arabesque #1. Oh, love that piece. Like, just love it. I played it when I was in high school.
That's so cool.
And I canvassed my 2 very musically talented children, and I was like, would you think that a 7th grader could play this? And my son was like, if it's a really talented 7th grader, absolutely, no problem. And I was like, okay, that's real. And then my son went to a wonderful music camp called Encore Coda in Maine.
In Maine?
So I totally took that. I lifted that from his life. And I went to, like, we would visit them at camp and, like, watch them perform. And I was like, I wish I had something like this when I was growing up. Like, that's how I often feel. Like, when they, like, I was like, oh, this is such a great place. And it was a place where they all kinds of kids played all kinds of music. And so it didn't matter what you liked to do. You could find it there.
Amazing.
It was great. It was really great.
Did you do musical theater too? Because there's a bit in here about musical theater.
I did musical theater in my school, mainly because, I mean, I love musical theater, but my school was so small that when we put on a musical, everyone got to audition. Parents, teachers, yes, like, and the entire high school. We had a ball. I got to play the old mom in Bye Bye Birdie, and my English teacher was Albert R. Peterman, who wanted to be an English teacher, and I was like, this is ironic. This is great. It was really fun. Yeah.
Did you make a playlist while you were writing this? Did you listen to music?
I listened to a lot of classical music when I was writing this. And okay, the one thing that I never played that I researched for this book was there's a piece of music called Spiegel in Spiegel, which means mirror in the mirror. And I was like, yeah, we have to have some kind of, like, whoa, that's freaky. And it's a beautiful piece, and it's for strings and piano, and it's really, really beautiful. So it's either a violin or a cello and a piano, and it's beautiful. And I was like, and like the piano part is not too hard, and I was like, a middle schooler could play this. That's not impossible, and to believe. And I also just thought that the name was perfect for this book.
Yeah,
it
was perfect.
Yeah.
Was the process of writing this much different from writing Red, White, and Whole?
Yes. So Red, White, and Whole, I feel like, okay, so first of all, the interesting thing about it is that I got the idea for Red, White, and Whole like when I knew I had signed the contract to write Much Ado About Baseball, and I hadn't finished it yet. So like we had sold it on proposal, so it was like a 4 chapters and a synopsis. And I was like, okay, now I have to write this. And then I got the idea for Red, White, and Whole, and I was like, and then I told myself, I said, well, this is the deal. You get to think about Red, White, and Whole. That wasn't the name of it. It was just called Blood at the time, which would have been a terrible name for a book. So I was like, you can think about this book one night a week. So Friday nights were the night that I thought about that book. And I didn't even write that much. I would like listen to 80s music, and I would like take notes on what I wanted to put in there. And I knew it was going to be a book and verse, so I thought of poem ideas. And then the rest of the week I would work on Much Ado About Baseball. And when I finally turned that in, I wrote Red, White, and Whole, and I think it was like in 6 or 7 weeks. It just was like, boom. It was like waiting for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so that was different because I felt like I already knew the story before I wrote the first word. This book, I wrote it in like 2020 and 2021, which, as you remember, were horrible times. Like, it was really hard. And the first draft was, whatever. I was just like, here, just like, please, editor, do something with this.
Did you sell this one on spec too?
No, this was the second book in that deal.
Oh.
So for those of you not familiar with publishing, sometimes when a publisher loves your book, they basically say, not only do we want to buy this book, we want to buy the next book you're going to write, whatever it is. And so you basically have to fulfill that contract before you go write other stuff. So this was the second book. Yeah. So I knew something was happening, but it was hard. It was hard because the world was hard at that time. And verse and prose, that first draft was not particularly good. But the good news is that my editor took a long time to get back to me, which doesn't sound like it's good news, but sometimes it's good news, because sometimes you just need a break from a story, and then you come back to it months later with like good notes from a person who knows what they're talking about, and be like, yeah, I agree with that, or no, I don't really agree with that, but that's okay because I got something else. I understand what the problem is, and I have my own way of fixing it. So that was helpful, and but then that revision, once I got the notes and I did that revision was really good. Like, that next round was really, really good. I felt much better about the story, and I felt like I knew what was going on. But it was hard. It was just hard, and it was a weird time because you know, COVID was happening and everything was virtual and we never got to see anybody anymore. And then by the time the final draft was coming out, like we heard about the Newbery and I was like, wait, what's happening? Like I don't even know what planet I'm on right now. So it was you know, it was a tumultuous time.
Yes. Tumultuous feels like the right word.
Yeah.
I'm sure you all know this, but Red, White, and Whole had many honors bestowed upon it, including the Newbery honor and the Walter D. Myers Award and the New England Book. Yes, that was
21.
21.
Yeah. They were the first. They were amazing. The booksellers. Yay, booksellers.
Yay for good books.
Yeah, oh, thank you.
Let me check the time because I want to make sure